Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So, I know you went to school in the region, right? Sac State, and then school management, Davis.
Yes.
Did you grow up in Sacramento, or?
I was born in South Korea, so not the northern part of Korea, but the southern part. And I actually moved to Virginia, and then went back to Korea, and then moved here in '86 in Sacramento.
Oh, right on.
And I've made it my home, mostly.
So how old were you, if you don't mind me asking?
I was around 11 years old.
Oh, right on. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So, what was your first job?
Oh, boy. My first job was legal. Legal job? Or just kidding, all right?
Yeah.
It was actually during the summertime when I was in middle school. I went out and picked vegetables, specifically picked the type of cucumbers you use for pickles. So during the summer, that's how I made my money. And then I'd get up like every other paper boy in Sacramento when there was a Sacramento Union.
Right on.
And so I ran the local paper route in South Sac for that for a while.
Very cool. Very cool. So is that, did you kind of always think you were going to be an entrepreneur, or is that something that evolved, or?
You know, I learned a valuable lesson. I remember one day we went out to pick some cucumbers. It was really early in the morning. It was a place called 4J's on the corner of Power Inn and Elder Creek. And it was called 4J's because the guy who owned it had 4 children, and eventually became 5J's, 6J's, 7J's. They owned a local market. And so we went out. He goes, all right, everyone. Today you're in for a treat. I go, great. You know, what's going to happen? He goes, I'm going to take you guys out to McDonald's. I was like, fucking fantastic. You know what I mean? So, you know.
How old were you?
So I was, in the 7th grade? I don't know.
Fucking fantastic.
So, yeah. So I was like 11.
Mouth on you at some point.
Yeah, I was like 11.
So that started early.
Yeah, that was a treat. And he took us out, after about 5 hours, he finally brought us back to McDonald's. And he gave us a hamburger, but I realized, not hamburger, but the Egg McSandwich. And I noticed that I was short by $5. I was like, hey, I'm short $5. He goes, yeah, I took you guys out. And so I learned a valuable lesson there that, I think, he was obviously a businessman, right? And wherever, the commerce flowed, it then distributes. And that was my first lesson, you know what I mean, in terms of where to be at in the funnel.
So you finished up with school management, and what was the first thing you did after school?
So I graduated B school in 2007. I had just quit my job about a quarter before I finished.
Oh, okay.
So I worked in management for Franklin Templeton Investments, and worked my way up from analyst to management, and from there I started off a bunch of failed companies. None of them worked. It was a company called Spoontastic. It's basically like Yelp, but it was basically reviews for the actual dishes themselves. It was a terrible idea. The second one was called Stafari. It's a jungle out there. And that was staffing for nurses, because at the time, federal regulation came into play where it changed the nurse-to-patient ratio. And I knew there was going to be a shortage of nurses. Yeah. That didn't go anywhere. And then a social network, that didn't go anywhere, clearly. And then, a yogurt shop.
So that's where I first ran into you, was the yogurt shop. Mochi yogurt. Mochi yogurt. So tell us a little bit about that and how you made it from
tech to yogurt.
And then back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, it was initially going to be a tea shop. It was actually going to be called 10B's Tea. And I use the word actually a lot. And so I studied tea in New York, in Manhattan. So I'm a level 2 certified tea master, believe it. So what does that mean? Absolutely nothing. And then I came back here, it was hot summer. I was like, you know what? I don't know how much tea we can serve during the summertime. And I'm not sure if Sacramento has the amount of tea culture, you know what I mean, for the type of tea service I wanted to do. And so there was an ailing cafe called Cafe Flood. You guys remember that? It was basically, it was a religiously inspired coffee shop. And I knew it wasn't doing too well, so I put in an offer for $14,500. They gave me the middle finger, so I left. And then came back later on, offered it again, and they took it. And so I bought the cafe, gutted it, And I heard about this Pinkberry thing going on in Southern California, which was, the frozen yogurt. I had never seen the place. I've only read about it. And so I formulated my own yogurt, decided to do something refreshing, unique, and new. And I knew it needed like an Asian twist, just because everyone stereotypes. I mean, you're all looking at me. The first thing you see is an Asian man, right? And next you see an Asian man with a nice jacket, right? And the third thing you recognize, his voice doesn't match the way he looks. And so we all categorize. And so I knew if I was going to open up a yogurt shop, I knew it needed a twist that was authentic. And I love mochi. I grew up eating it. And I decided to call it mochi yogurt. And I was like, God, I hope mochi tastes good on yogurt. It just so happened that it did. And then just, the rest, the yogurt shop was a huge success. I had about $10,000 in my checking account at that time left. And so first month was a bust. I wouldn't be here. But the yogurt shop was a grand success. We had 400 customers on day one. The yogurt machines kept breaking down because they're overheating from all the customers. And so that's how it started. Part of it.
Superhero City, from yogurt to Superhero
Yes.
City. Take us on that little, bridge the gap for me.
Sure. So I had an opportunity to expand mochi yogurt. I had an opportunity to expand it throughout Northern California. I had investors, had people coming to me. Oh my God, this is going to be the next big craze. But I was like, you know what? I need to do an audit. I go, first of all, how easy is it to replicate this business? It's pretty easy, right? There's yogurt shops everywhere. So that's one. Two, do I love this? I like it, but I didn't love it. And so I was like, okay, I need to think of something else. I need to use the profits here. Because the way I thought about it was, I thought of the yogurt shop as a business that actually gave me time to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. And at that time, Facebook opened up its social network. Do you guys remember when back in about 2007, 2008, you got a bunch of requests, someone likes you, who's a hottie, they send you hearts, spam my wall with a bunch of crappy pictures you don't want to see. Do you guys remember that time? Yeah. That was because of app developers like me. and so I was like, oh my God, it's a gold rush. Let's do that. And let's create these shitty apps that spam people's walls. And so that's what we did. And everyone came there, but there was a problem. One, they didn't make much money. Two, after about 6 months, everyone hated them, right? You would get 50 requests for, do you like me? Do you want to do me? Do you think I'm cute? Someone winked at you. Someone poked you 5 times. People got inundated with this. And
I'm realizing you had more interesting friends than I did, though. Go ahead.
And believe it or not, we were very successful, but not on Facebook. But do you guys remember MySpace? Okay, do you remember High Five? What about this? Raise a hand. Orchid. What?
Oh.
Yanja. Londistan. Okay, so these were all the social networks outside the U.S. before Facebook was big. Okay. In fact, High Five was the largest social network in the world that you never heard of outside the U.S. We blew up huge with these shitty applications on these other social networks. Huge. We had several 100,000 daily people. But the problem was they were in the wrong countries. They were in countries that didn't monetize well, like Macedonia, you know what I mean? And other emerging markets where it was very difficult to monetize Google AdWords. And so even though we were blowing up in all these different countries, we were only making about $150 a day, and our server costs were about $75 to $100 a day. And we had 30 of these things, by the way. 30 of these terrible applications. And that's how I got started. It was 30 of these terrible failures, but I learned a lot along the way. I learned a lot.
But then you had one that wasn't a failure.
Yes. So number 31, it was a video game. And it was actually number 28. We started to experiment with virtual currency. Now it's, it's pretty pervasive now, right? Every time, how many of you, by raise of hand, play mobile games? I know all of you do. Come on. Candy Crush, Clash of Clans, Galaxy of Heroes, Star Wars. That was my latest game. Heroes of Dragon Age. These games are free to play, right? And then you feel the pinch when you actually want to do something within a game. After you play 30 minutes, it basically twists your nipple to pay, right? Or for Candy Crush, it gives you an extra turn, right? And so we discovered some of this magic in app number 28, where basically you buy stickers. And we were making money for the first time. $20 here, $40 here. I was like, who would buy these virtual stickers? These are just images we found online and threw it in our app. And people are unlocking these things. I go, we're onto something. We know how to develop an app. 2, we realized that the Western market, they were starting to get comfortable purchasing things online, especially through these apps. And thirdly, I wanted to do something that I actually liked, which was video games. And so in between serving yogurt, cups, I wrote up a 30-something page document called Superhero City. It was the first game that I've ever designed. And then I hired a bunch of people who've never designed a game before. Luckily for us, after about 3-4 months of development, we launched on June 16th, and it wasn't an immediate success. But a month later, it was doing $350 a day. I was like, wow, this is better than, it's making more money than all of our terrible applications. And people actually like this. I said, okay, let's double down. And, 3 months later, it was doing $1,000 a day every day. And then from June to December, it was doing $7,000 to $8,000 a day every day. And then 6 months from there, it was doing about $28,000 a day every day. And at that point in time, I had the courage to kill all the terrible applications, blew them up, never looked at them again. And that's how the game industry started for me.
So back up a little bit.
Sure.
Talk about the 30 failures,
Yeah.
and then the big success.
Yes.
We'll talk about where that led as well.
Yeah.
What kept you going through 30? Because that's a lot of, I don't know if you've been told this before.
Yeah.
That's a lot of failures.
Oh, God, that's a lot. Oh, my God, that's a lot. I mean, shit, that was hard.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, that was fucking hard. Suddenly you finish B school, I got this certificate or something. It's supposed to be useful. It's supposed to have some type of commercial value, because it basically means that you've reached a certain educational, rank, and you're supposed to be pretty smart. Trust me, after about 20 failures, you're not feeling so smart. In fact, you're feeling kind of stupid. And you start doubting everything. And suddenly the siren call from all your friends saying, hey, Mark, why don't you get a job? When I heard things like, why don't you get a job, it was equivalent to me hearing, why don't I just go shoot myself? There's no way in fucking hell I'm going to go get a job. I go, I didn't sacrifice all this to be negative and then go get a job to get out of the negative that I just dug myself into. No way in hell.
So it just wasn't an option.
Oh, zero.
Quitting wasn't an option.
At the time when I was married, I told my ex-wife, and she goes, hey, it's time to wake up. You got to give up this hobby. And I told her, I said, I would rather live under a bridge than stop. And I was dead serious, and she knew that.
Yeah.
And so for me, I had moved up quite well at Franklin Templeton. I was making about $118,000. You know what I mean? It's my late 20s. That's good money back then. I'm 42. That was, 14 years ago? Jeez, that's a long time. That was a lot of money for a young man. You know what I mean? And but I realized that even though my pay kept going up, my happiness plateaued when I started making about $70K. Anything above and beyond that actually made no difference in my happiness. And so I knew then that something needed to change. I knew that. And there was one thing that I'm really proud of looking back, is I had the courage to quit. I had the courage to give everything up. So I sold my house, I cashed out my 401k, and I moved in with my mom. And so, talk about conviction.
That is, yeah. I mean, all that stuff, I'm like, wow, that's big. Wow. Yeah,
But
exactly.
The biggest takeaway is that once you muster up the courage, and trust me, we all have this courage, you're suddenly free. You're free from the maintenance of life where you don't have to pay those expenses anymore. You're suddenly free to live kind of carelessly. And as weird as it sounds, for me, I entered one of the most creative periods of my life. Suddenly I was untethered to someone else's expectations and desires. I was completely free to be myself. And I learned a lot about myself when I was unemployed and living with my mom. It was a great period of time.
So you really didn't just evolve into an entrepreneur. I mean, you made the decision. I mean, there's an actual point where it's like, I'm becoming an entrepreneur. I mean, you made a decision and you made the choice and you just sucked it up and you did it.
Generally,
Yeah.
Not entirely.
Okay.
So when I graduated from Sac State with a bachelor's degree, I raised a couple $1 million in my mid-20s. I had created some software, and it was an early search engine for events, and it was really quite cool. This was back in 1998, and in 1999, we had launched a service. And everyone knows, remember what happened in 1999? Fuckcompany.com. Do you guys remember that? The big implosion of all the .com companies, pets.com. And so, but that wasn't the reason why we went under. It's because I hired a bunch of hot girls. I spent lavishly with other people's money and had a party. And I learned a very valuable lesson. Cash flow is very important. And never put me in that position, a mid-20s, young man into that type of role with that type of money and that type of responsibility and think he knows what he's doing. And so that was my first taste of someone else's failure in terms of money, but I took that very personally.
So fast forward ahead, you had a success with Superhero City.
Yes.
And some subsequent successes as well.
Mm-hmm.
You stayed in Sacramento.
Yep.
You didn't grow and say, okay, now we need more developers, we need more talent, we need to go to San Francisco or Silicon Valley. Tell us about the decision to stay here.
So, obviously we initially stayed here because I founded the game company on the second floor of the yogurt shop. It was a small little stock room, a little larger than the bathroom back there, the men's bathroom, maybe about 4 times that size. That was our headquarters. So in between, designing a game, I went downstairs, to serve yogurt and to make yogurt. And luckily for us, we were profitable, about 4 months after we launched the game. We had about 6 or 7 employees. And at that point in time, it was obvious we should grow it in Sacramento. And we were able to scale to about 18 people. At that point in time, I knew I needed to change strategy. I needed a new location. So for those of you who don't know where it's at, it's called Capital Games now. It's on 20th and J, right across the street from Pete's Coffee.
Yeah.
Yes. I knew we needed some type of location that had some type of cultural brand. That way when we hired people from San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Seattle, when they come to Midtown, they can feel the spirit and the energy. That was very deliberate. I wanted to come here and say, yes, this is not what I thought Sacramento was. And everything they think Sacramento is, that's true too. But here's something else they didn't know. And from there, we're able to scale from 18 people to 78 employees. And by the way, in 2.5 years. And we recruited people all over the place. As far, on the East Coast as Florida, all the way from New York. And then, people down south, people from San Francisco. We opened up a second location, an office in Union Square, San Francisco, right across the street from Ted Baker. And that was our sales office. That worked out pretty well for us. But all the development and the brain trust for our product development was here in Sacramento.
So then came acquisition.
Yes.
At what point did you open yourself up to that idea, and why did you go with the company you went with?
That's a really tough question because at the time, looking back, it was obviously, the right decision. At the time, we were making so much money. We didn't need to sell. We were netting hundreds of thousands of dollars every month. And we already had $1 million in the checking account. And so we were already just making money hand over fist. But I also knew, too, that we can only scale so much. There was a lot of knowledge we lacked. There was a lot of, technology we didn't have. And I knew that it would require a significant investment. I knew this intuitively. Because, how many of you remember the Mafia War-like games back in 2009 on Facebook? Do you remember that? They were very text-based, right? Very, very, I guess you can say archaic by today's standards. But look how far they've matured, right? If you look at mobile games, right? Full 3D. Games are now costing between $10 to $20 million. I saw that. I saw where that was going. And I saw how fast it was going. And I knew we needed a big partner. So at the time I said, okay, we can either A, raise a lot of money, right? 2, we can get acquired. 3, we can just milk this, you know what I mean, and just keep the cash flows. I was like, milking is not very satisfying, right? You know, I wanted to do something. I wanted to, you know, leave a legacy for Sacramento, and I wanted to build something here that sustains. So that was immediately off the table. That's not why I started this. 2, okay, let's see if we can raise money. And it was very easy. We're offered $13 million. And the way it was structured was they were going to give us, the 2 co-founders, $7 million cash, you know, for us to pocket, and the rest of the money would go back into the company. And the reason why they did that was so that you don't have to worry. You know, if you have a couple $1 million in your bank account, now you're going all out. So that was on the table. The other option, getting acquired, was we had several other companies bidding for us. Now, I can't go into the details of that just because I'll get in trouble. But it was EA and another company. So it was EA and another company and this venture capital firm that were bidding. I picked EA. And by the way, they all eventually talked to each other. And they all miraculously equalized at the same offer price.
So
And this
make a decision.
This went on for months. You know, it's funny because one of the companies that we didn't want to get acquired by, we kept saying no. They kept adding more millions. And me and the co-founder, you know, he had a daughter. His daughter kept getting sick, so he couldn't make it to all the meetings. His daughter wasn't sick. So we dragged that out for months while we're waiting for EA. And I wanted to go with EA because I wanted to get acquired by the Bioware division of EA. So Bioware made Baldur's Gate, Dragon Age, Mass Effect, Star Wars, you know, Sodar. They made an amazing history of games. And I worshipped Bioware growing up as a young man. Worshipped them. And suddenly, the Bioware co-founders descended on Sacramento and took interest in this little scrappy studio here. And he said, you know, your studio reminds me of the early days of Bioware. It has that same type of spirit. Because I like what you've done here. And I just knew that we were destined to work together. And that was it for me. That was a 6-month process, and it's grueling. One thing you don't read about in these acquisitions, they are freaking grueling. EA will send out their top lieutenants in every specialty to grill the shit out of you the entire day for months on end. And then they report back, and they all get together, and the question they ask is, why shouldn't we acquire them? And this went on for months. This went on for about 4.5, 5 months before they finally decided to commit. It was grueling, absolutely grueling. But I knew when they gave the green light, I knew that we'd be a good fit. And so did they.
So, rumored around $35 million purchase. Again, the question seems to come up. Sacramento. I remember this happening, and I remember thinking right away. My first thought is, you know, we're neighbors, right? My first thought is, oh no, where are they going to go?
Yeah.
And again, was that ever on the table? Was there ever any encouragement to leave Sacramento?
No. So the way EA acquires studios is that they go to where the talent is. Okay? Talent lives in pockets in the game industry. They all don't live in one area. They live all kind of different locations. Prince Edward Islands, Melbourne, Australia, right? And so EA has about between 25 and 30 worldwide studios. And they've acquired almost all of them. And most of them are outside of California. And so when they acquire a studio, they acquire it for its magic. So for us, the magic is partly location, the people who've set up in this location, right, their families. Imagine trying to uproot that studio. You'd have to uproot their entire social network with them. Grandmas, grandfathers, right, their dogs, their house. It's very expensive. And so they want to keep the talent there. And so when EA acquires a studio, they ask themselves, can we invest? Can we take this studio from version 2.0 to version 4.0 by bringing in some senior leaders to help, by giving technology and know-how, and educating them? And so EA, when they acquire a studio, they invest millions of dollars in infrastructure, technology, know-how, and staff. They are a great company.
That's fantastic. So, you've been working with them for a while now.
Yes.
went from being an entrepreneur
Yep.
in many ways to an employee.
Yes.
And what was that transition like?
It's tough. Yeah. The first year was hard. Suddenly had a boss, even though it was the legendary, Dr. Ray Muzuka, the founder of BioWare. It was still hard because now I had to do status reports to somebody on a weekly basis. I was like, status reports? The fuck is that? You know what I mean? And suddenly I was getting an employee review. I was like, are you kidding me? And so there was a lot of corporate, overhead that I wasn't used to. But, that took me about a year and a half to digest. And I can say, okay, I can see why that's. But for the most part, EA leaves its studio heads alone, right? Because they don't want to mess up the magic. Oh my God, that guy looks like Clint Eastwood. I had to do a double take. I was like, Clint? Sorry.
He's very popular back.
And so it's very autonomous, very autonomous. And so the way the general managers work and operate is your employee review is basically this. Did your game chart top 10 worldwide? That was basically the only metric they had. And so that's very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Did you succeed? Did you fail? Or is this another investment year for the next year, right?
Yeah.
And we had a couple investment years after we got acquired. But luckily, our last game was a worldwide hit. But it was tough. And then about 2.5, 3 years in, I began to fully appreciate the wisdom. I mean, EA has, talk about studs in gaming. EA's got them. These are the best in the industry. And you get to have lunch with them. You get to go drinking with them. You get to do all kind of things with them after hours. And just having able to meet some of these people was just phenomenal. I mean, just the talent density within EA is phenomenal. So many smart people in the game industry. So many. And so I switched my thinking to, wow, I'm getting paid an absurd amount of money to learn and to work with some of the world's biggest IP like Star Wars and Dragon Age. I go, what a privilege, what an honor. But it took me some time, okay? That was not easy. It was not easy.
So, biggest regret?
Oh, biggest regret. God. I wish I would have succeeded sooner. No, I don't.
Do you really?
No.
I mean, because, yeah.
No. God, I don't think I've ever thought about that, the biggest regret. I don't, it's not so much regrets as they were, for me, they were necessary steps of failure. Because failure does a lot of wonderful things. Imagine the last time you broke up with your relationship with a significant other. What do? Besides getting a late night booty call, you know what I mean, from some stranger. But like, what do? You self-audit, right? You ask yourself, why did this fail? Besides the other person is crazy, right? Because you could be the crazy one. It's an audit point. And, those 30 failures sound like a lot, but believe me, I said, that's character building. I learned with each one. I learned something about myself. Like, I will not quit. I will keep going. And I'll keep trying different things until something works, you know what I mean? And so for me, failure is a forcing function to become better. And so, for me, I don't have those regrets. To me, I wear those, those are all scars that I'm really proud of.
So I know here at the Hive and elsewhere, you're very helpful to young entrepreneurs. What is your biggest word of advice? If you have one, if you could say one thing, if you have one word of advice, what would it be?
One word?
Yeah, well, not one word. I mean, advice to give.
I would say this. Actually, by the raise of hands, how many of you operate your own business? You're an entrepreneur, want to be an entrepreneur? By the raise of hands, just curious. Okay, so almost everyone. So here's what I've seen makes a difference between someone who eventually, I use the word eventually, okay, eventually succeeds. By the way, anyone can succeed, okay? You just have to make sure you have enough time. It's not going to take 1 year. It's not going to take 2. It's probably take 3 or 4 years, minimum. It'll be very painful. But here's my advice to you. If I could talk to the young version of Mark, when I was starting out, I would have given him this advice. Mark, know the difference between persistence and stubbornness. Here's why. Someone who's stubborn doesn't give up. They keep going. It's kind of admirable, but it's also kind of annoying too. It's annoying because, and it's going to actually prevent you from succeeding because you get new information that tells you that you should probably adjust your sails, right? This isn't like launching a rocket ship where if you're a few degrees off, you're dead. This is more like setting sail out in the open, water. And so that's stubbornness. Despite new information, you continue to do the same thing. 30 failures, right? Persistence is different. You don't give up, but you continue to persist in light of new information, and you adjust your sails accordingly. That to me is the biggest difference between people who succeed eventually and those who give up. It's really that. So ask yourself, if you're in a position and something's not working out and you kind of know that this isn't right and you kind of hope that things might turn out for the better, you're probably fucked. You should self-audit and ask yourself, am I being stubborn or should I persist? That'd be my greatest piece of advice.
Fantastic. So now we're going to open it up to questions. And I'm sure some people have some great questions. Anybody have some questions for Mark?
Yeah, I have a question. When you had these 30 failures, what kind of time frame was that over?
It depends.
How quickly did you iterate?
Quickly. The first one was like maybe a week. But as the apps got more sophisticated, like, when they were app number 21, 23, 24, they could take several weeks to a couple months. They got more complex. Like we created this dating application. It was very complex. And that one took us a couple months. And so, but that adds up. I'm talking man months. I literally worked like a dog. I was at my desk, from morning till night. And I was stinky, eating bad food, drank a lot of coffee. But they usually lasted between a week to a couple months, depending on the complexity. But there's only a few of them that were that complex.
What's an example of where you had to pivot on one of your visions where you saw it wasn't working, whether it was with Mochi or with an application? What was it and how painful was it to make that decision?
That's a good question. You have to know you have to know that you're measuring the right thing, first of all. I'll give you an example. We had this application called Kiss. It was basically a flirting app where you blew kisses. And I discovered there was a guy named Potato in Thailand who's a huge celebrity because he received millions of kisses. It was a dating app. And we're like, yes! We have like 300,000 to 400,000 daily, people in this flirting with each other. But that wasn't the right measure as well. There was a measure that we were missing called engagement. How long did they actually spend within this dating app? And what we discovered that the average was 1 minute and 45 seconds. And they would generally churn out, meaning not come back after like the third or fourth day. And so reach was one thing we measured. That's important. How many users are we getting? 2, engagement. Are they engaged, right? And thirdly is monetization. So here's where we really screwed up. We only looked at reach and monetization. We got all these users. They're not making shit because we didn't measure their engagement. And that actually led us to eventually decide, led me to decide to make a video game because I knew that video games engage. The average time spent for a player in our games was 60 minutes per day. So make sure that you're measuring the right things, right? Monetization is an outcome from engagement, right? And if you can scale engagement with reach, you got yourself a business.
So the point is, it looks like you recently stepped down from EA. So can you talk about your next venture?
Sure. So right now we're in stealth. Honestly, I was supposed to be retired for at least like a year or so, and I'm a father, and I got a baby mama. She's my girlfriend, and I'm pretty happy, and but I have a couple friends who are saying, Mark, we got this great business, and over the last several months I've been vetting it, doing my due diligence. It's a good sized business, a big investment, and I decided to agree to do it. And so right now we're in stealth mode. We just raised about $1 million in external funding. We have $2 million committed. We're all putting some money into this thing, but we're acquiring a local business for several $1 million that we're going to funnel a lot of things into to scale it out throughout Sacramento. But we'll make an announcement in about a month. And it's actually, we're located here right now in the Urban Heights. But it's in the medical field, by the way. It has nothing to do with video games. Zero. Absolutely nothing.
Makes sense. I can see the transition. Yeah. Any other questions? I saw a
User
bunch of hands up.
acquisition. We have a video game, a gambling game that's launching in the UK next
Yeah.
week. And user acquisition has been one of the biggest
Yeah.
hurdles, obviously.
Yep.
Talking to all these companies, they want to sell you this, rich users and all that.
Yep.
I think the people getting rich are the people selling the users,
Yes.
quite frankly.
Yes.
Do you have any suggestions on how to do that reach or user acquisition in
Yes.
other methods?
Absolutely. We were masters of that. We were phenomenally good at that. And so it's a good question, right? So I'm going to break that question down. Every business has three components, right? You have users who value a service or a product you provide, right? That then generate money. Hopefully it generates more money than it takes to provide that goods or service, right? The reason I'm breaking that down is because I'm now going to answer a question. And so, first of all, you're going to start off with a small marketing budget. No more than $5,000. It's a gambling app. What kind of gambling? Is it
Slot
Oh, slot.
with a wrestling theme.
Okay.
And engages social media within the game itself.
Okay, well, casino games are generally female-dominated. It's interesting. It's a wrestling theme. So it's actually going after a smaller segment within that. So maybe that's an underserved market.
Actually, in the UK, it tips the other way.
Really?
Yeah, in the US, social casino tipped towards females.
Yes.
In the UK, gambling tips towards men.
Okay, so this is gambling in the sense of
Slightly.
you win virtual coins, correct? You don't
Yes.
win real money, right?
No, it's real money.
Oh,
Yeah.
you win, you get real money.
Yeah, it's real money.
Okay, well then, same thing. You allocate $5,000. You know your male demographic. I would say you would target male users from 30 to 55 years old, okay? You would spend some money against that. Start off with about $500. And then I'm going to break down some of the science for everyone here. I won't go into too much detail. But this is the way it works out. And it must work this way, otherwise you don't have a business.
Okay.
You're going to spend $500 against those users in the UK. You're going to acquire, let's say, 100 users. Okay, that's $5 per user. I'm just making these up. Actually, for $500, you're probably going to acquire about $2.50. You're probably going to acquire about 250 users, male users, maybe less. Okay, 2.5% of those users must convert to paying users. They must. Okay, so whatever that 2.5% converts into, it must be greater than the amount of money you spent. If that's true, congratulations, you have a great business. If that's not true, you have to study your engagement loop, to figure out why users are not engaging. But that part must be true. If that is not true, what I just said, your business will fail. And so that's called the lifetime value of a user. Okay? So if you spend an average of $2.50 acquiring a user, your game must on average generate more than $2.50. And generally the way you measure it is that the initial set of users will be your golden cohort users. They're going to be inflated. They're going to look a lot better than your other users. You should get a return on that within 6 months. If you don't, something is probably not right with your game. On average, for a mature game like that, you make back your level of investment in that user, whatever you spent, within a year and a half, you make that back. Our games, when we're starting out initially, we made all the money back within 45 days. And then we doubled it in 6 months. So you can see how we're able to scale. You can see how our games engaged and got people to monetize very, very well. And so that's the formula. That is the formula. Yep.
So your organization went from being very small to being fairly large in a pretty short period of time. How did you develop the culture of the company that you built? And was it intentional, or was it just something that sort of organically evolved?
It was very intentional. Absolutely critical. The culture starts with the co-founders. You know, my co-founder was in San Francisco, and so he developed more of like an analytic sales culture there. Here in Sacramento, I developed a culture around the type of games we wanted to make. So let me give you an example of how culture is expressed through the way we hire people. And so when I initially hired people, I asked them a trick question. I asked them, how many role-playing games, give me 3 role-playing games that you like playing. Now, anyone who plays role-playing games like Baldur's Gate, Final Fantasy, Zelda, you know, who's an addict, they can't give you 3, right? They have probably like 5 or 6 favorite ones. That's how I knew that they were absolutely crazy about the type of games we're going to make. And that question weeded out a lot of people. It starts with the co-founders. The values start with you. And we're always very direct and very transparent. When our company initially wasn't doing very well, we told people, hey, things aren't looking so good. But you know, if we do these things, this might happen or this might happen. And so our culture ended up evolving into a culture that's obsessed with the type of games we make. That's 1. 2, very direct, very transparent. But that started, you know, with the founders. It always starts with the founders. Now, the part that's unintentional is if you just do these things unintentionally and it just comes across to you naturally, you're going to probably make a lot of mistakes. You may have some inconsistencies, and you're probably going to confuse some employees. But I was absolutely designing a certain type of culture I wanted. That started with me.
Did you have any way of measuring that, measuring your success in terms of the culture you're building?
I mean, I guess one way to measure that is, you know, you look at the type of products you build, the quality. You know, 2, you look at your turnover. 3, you should just kind of feel it. The greatest compliment that I ever received from visitors was, you know, when they walked into my studio, their response was, wow, there's magic in here. I've never been, you know, in a company like this before. You know why? Because people are putting up little decorations, or putting things up on the wall, right? They're playing games during lunchtime, and on Wednesday after work, they're playing board games. I can't force people to do that. These are all expressions of commitment and love for what they do. That just has to be good. And our attrition rate within all of VA was the lowest out of all the game studios. We had the lowest attrition rate. Sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's not so good. Some people don't want to leave. Please go. To answer your question?
Yep. Thank you.
I'm learning a lesson with the answer to your last question. I want to ask you a theoretical question.
Sure.
I'm sure you'll give me a brutally honest answer.
Yeah.
Do you think it would have been possible, say that you didn't have the money or the space or something restricted you from being able to have your developers right there with you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it would have been possible to build the quality and to iterate on your game the way you wanted to the developers distributed?
Tough question. Not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You got to be there. Hey, I need you to tweak this. Hey, you know, no one can leave until this is done, and I'll sit right next to the exit, right? And I was always working, and so, you know, culture, I was always working. And if I asked people to work through the weekend, I was there from morning to end. You got to be there, because making games is hard work. You know, when you play a game, you go, why didn't they do these things? Do that. It is so freaking hard that you've got to be there. You've got to hear the chatter. hey, Brian, I don't know if this game doesn't quite feel right. You're not going to get that, remote. You just won't. And it's a different type of feeling. You don't have the culture. So no.
Now, do you also have like a game strategist and then a person who's not a developer who's sitting there saying, okay, this is the way the game should work, or is that just basically just your job?
In the beginning, it was just my job. In the beginning, games don't fail because of tech, right? You can always fix that or throw more bodies at that. Games fail because of a lack of engagement. They just don't retain users. If it's a leaky bucket, you know what I mean? If 100 users go in and only 2 stick around, it's probably going to fail. If 30 to 40 stick around, you got a chance. And so, but to create that type of magic, you know what I mean? To create that type of magic, one person, so in game design, one person needs to own the vision, okay? One person needs to own the vision. They must have an idea of the type of experience that they want to create. Imagine if you're watching a Spider-Man movie and you had 2 people who had 2 different versions of Spider-Man as a vision. How would that work out? It would look weird. Same thing with games. Okay, it doesn't have to be the game producer. It could be the game designer. It can even be an engineer. But just someone on the team has to own the vision. One person. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, you definitely answered it. I have one more follow-up question. Did you ever have a game that you're building and then you realized it was wrong and someone said, oh, you should do, all of this is wrong, we need to change the way the game works? Is it scary because that would cause a lot of development, or you're basically changing the whole entire game? Do you scrap the game or do you go after that change?
I actually have a question before your question. Why does their opinion matter? That's the first question I'd ask. Why does your opinion matter? Should I listen to you? Can you demonstrate that your opinion matters? Seriously. That's one of the things I've learned. And people, when you're making games, everyone has an opinion because everyone's paid fucking Candy Crush or Clash of Clans, right? Everyone has an opinion, right? Everyone. So trust me, I get bombarded with opinions. I put up my filter, I don't hear anyone, for the most part, right? But if there's a few people and I trust their judgment, I'll key into that. But the first question is, what's the quality of their thinking? Now, if the quality of their thinking is good, and you know it to be right, then you should scrap it and do it. Absolutely. The biggest mistakes I've ever made is I've made about 7 or 8 games. And, not all of them were commercial success. Only 3 of them were big, commercial success. The rest were failures. And I can tell you exactly why they failed. 1 failed because 2 people had the vision. Right? And so the game came out to be a kludge of, I don't know what the hell it was. It was a Frankenstein. Another game, I should not have put a person in charge who thought they should have been in charge. Why? Because they love playing games. But just because you love playing games, I don't really want, I was going to say I like watching sports, that's a lie. But, for those of you who like watching sports, doesn't mean you can play football. I know he can play football. He played Division I sports at UC Davis. I trust him, with his feedback in football. But it starts with, why should you trust someone's opinion? All my failures with games have been either I put the wrong person in charge or there were 2 people who had a vision of their own. That's why the game failed.
And we have time for one more question. James?
So, Mark, you clearly have a lot of love and even faith in Sacramento based off your past endeavors and clearly based on your future endeavors as well.
Yep.
I'm curious, what is your prediction or even maybe your hope for the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Sacramento? Where do you see it going forward? I mean, you've pivoted from games and apps before that. Now you're doing something in the medical field.
Medical financing, believe it or not. Yes.
That's
Of course,
awesome.
again, logical progression.
So where do you see it going? And you have a role in that.
So I'll start off, I'm going to take kind of the easy route to answering your question is, I'll tell you what Sacramento isn't, right? Sacramento isn't San Francisco, right? Sacramento's not Hawaii, right? But I'll tell you what Sacramento is, just based on what it's not. Sacramento is a really unique city. I do a lot of traveling around the world. I get to see a lot of different cities. One thing about Sacramento that really stands out to me is, we have this incredible creative culture here in Sacramento, and we're very shy about talking about it. It's almost like we're apologetic because we're not Silicon Valley. We're apologetic because we're not that city. You know what I mean? But so Sacramento has this very much a blue collar like mentality, but it has creative talent, you know, as good as any city. And so, and it's generally lumpy in different areas, right? Some places have it more than others. Whereas in Silicon Valley, it's very concentrated, you know, very, very dense. And so knowing that about Sacramento, you can use that to your advantage, right? For example, I knew that this game studio here would only grow so large, right? I knew that it was going to take a big effort to get it to 78 people. But I also knew this too. I also knew those 78 people are going to be super close. A lot closer than any other company that I've seen in Silicon Valley in terms of loyalty, in terms of love for what they're doing and their mission and their cause. You're not going to get that type of loyalty in Silicon Valley. The average tenure in Silicon Valley is 10 months, by the way. And so, you know, when you're starting a business, there's no reason why you can't create a world-class company here in Sacramento. There's just no excuse for that. The talent here, they stick, they stay, and they love Sacramento. Those are huge benefits. You know, people can buy a house here. You know, in Silicon Valley, it costs like $1 million for 700 square feet in San Francisco. You know what I mean? These are advantages. These are huge, huge advantages. Do you know how many people relocated from San Francisco to here? And do you know why? Because they wanted to raise a family and have a backyard. That's a huge advantage. A disadvantage is that it's, you know, it's sparse and lumpy in a few places. That is what it is. Do I see that changing in the next 5 to 10 years? I see the lumps growing, but it's not Silicon Valley, and it doesn't have to be.
Sparse and lumpy.
Yes, sparse and lumpy.
On that note,
Loyal.
we do have a little gift for you, but first I'm going to have everybody give them a round of applause. And Rick has a little